We are joined by Republican Texas legislative candidate Alan Schoolcraft on this edition of Spriester Sessions. Mr. Schoolcraft, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Steve.
Is it surreal to you at all for being, it's a long way from 1981 when you were first elected into the Texas legislature?
It is. In some ways it's very familiar, and in some ways it's totally different. The political landscape is so different today than it was back in 81. But the process of campaigning and knocking on doors, talking about issues, feels the same still.
Yeah, the last time you were in the legislature, Democrats were in power in Texas.
They ran everything. When I first ran, when I filed to run for office, out of 150 House members, 16 were Republicans. So that's how small of a minority we were at the beginning.
Why did you decide to run? Why did you decide to get into this race?
Well, it's funny. There's been folks trying to talk me into running for the last 6 or 8 years. And I kept saying no, no, let someone else do it. I've done it before, I've served my time. And I just kept saying no, but this time around, there were just issues that I really cared about. And then I think the final one was the school choice vote, when my opponent was one of the 21 Republicans that helped kill it. And that's something that I've believed in for many, many years. And I just said, okay, that's it. I'm going to try to do my part.
That was the final straw that got you in.
That was the final straw.
Is there, if somebody would have told you 6 months ago that you'd be sitting here in a runoff with Representative Kemple, would you have been surprised?
I wouldn't have believed it. My wife and I had plans for this year. We should be just about now getting back from a cruise in Europe, in Portugal and Morocco. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but yeah, we had to cancel that to take care of this business.
Yeah, and so talk about why you feel so strongly. The school voucher choice, whatever you want to call it, was the catalyst for you in this whole thing. Why do you feel so strongly about it?
I have believed in school choice since I was in the legislature. I was on the Public Education Committee even back then, and we were back then talking about school choice and charter schools as an alternative, the idea of trying to offer different educational settings for children. They don't all learn the same way, they don't all do the best under the same setting, so the idea is to provide different settings for different learning styles, on top of the idea of having competition. I'm a very strong believer in competition. I know that competition always makes the competitors better. I'm a businessman. I would love to have a monopoly, but I know that as I'm competing for customers, it's making me constantly look for ways to make a better product and a better service at a lower cost. I believe the same applies to education.
What do you say to people, though, that say it could hurt some of the smaller school districts, some of the more rural school districts? It seems to be the argument that this program will hurt them.
Well, the first thing I say is my priority concern is what's best for the students. How do we provide the best educational opportunities for all of the students? Once we determine that, then we figure out how the school districts fit into the mix with all of the options. Now, when I get past that, I say, I haven't heard anyone give a logical statement, a logical reason why school choice would affect small districts any more than it would any other district. But as I said, the first concern is what's best for the students.
Yeah. Do you see it as anti-public education has kind of been how it's been couched by some of the other
the opponents of school choice frame it as you can either be for school choice or you can be for public education. But I totally disagree with that. I am for education. I am for the students. I believe that public education has a very important role for that, and I think they provide services and settings that probably most students will thrive in or can thrive in if it's done well. So I totally support public education, and I do not believe that supporting school choice as an option in any way will hurt public education.
You keep saying school choice. Are you sensitive to the word voucher when people call it a voucher program? Do you think that's an accurate description?
The only reason I say school choice and because vouchers connotate something like it's a one-time you just hand over a voucher and have your education. But the proposal that was being debated and that the governor pushed last time wasn't for vouchers, it was for education savings accounts. And those work very similar to a health savings account in that money is deposited into an account and then dispersed from that account on a quarterly system. So it's just a different concept. I'm just trying to be more accurate when I talk about it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You're not necessarily. Just some people have been sensitive when you say vouchers and you talk about school choice and all of that.
No, I'm just really trying to be accurate when I talk about this whole issue.
Do you think that, it seems as if that's the only issue that you and Mr. Kemple seem to disagree on?
Oh, no. No.
Explain what the other differences.
As I've gotten into this, I really had personally, I'm very passionate about the entire woke agenda, the whole DEI, CRT, critical race theory. Those are issues I've been interested for years. And I've watched and I've seen news stories, but I've been stunned at how much of that we have in our universities and how it's growing in our public schools. That's an issue that I'm extremely passionate about. And he's chairman of the Higher Education Committee. He's sitting in a perfect position to address that issue, and he's not. He's not. In fact, I've seen videos of him doing amendments to DEI legislation to just undercut efforts to try to stop that. So he and I disagree very strongly on those issues.
Yeah. So it's more than just a one issue disagreement, is what you would say.
Additionally, there's reform issues in the House. The House have some real problems from a conservative perspective. We have a very liberal Republican speaker, and because of his arrangements with Democrats helping to get him elected, there's been a lot of legislation, a lot of conservative legislation just died in the House. That speaker's name is Dade Phelan. He's in a runoff just like this one.
Yeah.
A few months ago, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, who runs the Senate, in a speech said, "All I ask of my Republican primary voters is, ask your representative if he supports Dade Phelan. And if he does, please vote against him." That is the reason the Lieutenant Governor said that is because there's been dozens of conservative bills pass the Senate, go to the House, and die. Just die. Mm-hmm. That's because of the leadership in the House, and my opponent is, in fact, part of that leadership team. That's why he's a chairman.
Yeah. What's your problem with, what are your specific issues with what you call the woke agenda, the DEI, and some of those other things?
What I really, really dislike about it is those are all race-based ideologies. They divide us up among race. Critical race theory literally is based on the idea that there's oppressors and oppressed. And they actually teach children, white people are oppressors, black people are oppressed. There are children who have been given homework assignments on describe how white privilege has benefited you. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of things, that's critical race theory. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yeah.
Correct.
Diversity, what they're saying is, our country was built on a meritocracy. The whole idea was you hire the best people for the job. DEI is just the opposite. Regardless of merit, we need each separate identity and we need to make sure they're all represented appropriately within our workforce. I've been alive long enough to watch the progress this country has made. I remember the civil rights demonstrations in the 60s and riots, and I've watched our country progress to a racially tolerant society. We made tremendous progress towards what I would love to see, a colorblind society where race doesn't matter. You know, it's the quality of your character. I believe we were getting there. And around 10 years ago, that just turned on a dime. Suddenly, everybody was starting to focus on race, and it has created problems, and I believe we have reversed decades of progress because of DEI and critical race theory.
Talk about the role of Governor Greg Abbott and his endorsement and what that has meant for your campaign.
Sure, it was kind of interesting. He didn't know who I was when I filed. You know, there's people talking about, well, he recruited me. He didn't recruit me. He had no idea who I was. It was probably 2 weeks after I filed. I got word that the governor's people were vetting me. Okay, cool. And a few days after that, I got a call. They wanted to interview me, and we had a nice interview, talked about school choice and other issues. And then a few days after that, I got a call saying the governor would like to back me. So I was thrilled. Now, he's very popular. He has about an 80% popular rating in the primary and the Republicans in this district. And so he's been a tremendous help. His endorsement carries a lot of credibility, and he's put a lot of his resources into helping me. It has really helped me be competitive because it's very difficult to run against an incumbent. Incumbents have a phenomenal amount of PAC money and other money behind them. So the governor, with his help, has really, like I said, helped make me competitive.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of endorsements. I mean, Dan Patrick, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump. I mean, I know I'm leaving Ken Paxton. I know I'm leaving somebody out of there, but has any of them been as consequential as the endorsement of the governor?
Well, I'm going to say President Trump is fairly consequential as well. His endorsement has carried a lot of weight. Yes. But
would you be where you're at right now if it wasn't for the governor's support?
Well, I just don't know. I have no idea. I know that I would have worked just as hard. I would have done just as much doorbelling and so forth, but it would have been difficult. It would have been much more difficult to be where I am without his help, I'll say that.
What's going to be the difference? Let me go back a little bit. Were you disappointed on election night that you didn't get 50%?
I said all along, with 4 people in the race, getting 50% was no way it could happen. Towards election day, from my doorbelling and so forth, I started thinking, well, maybe it's possible, but I really worked at not getting my hopes up because I knew the odds were against it. So I won't say I was disappointed. I think it was a good showing. 48.11%, still pretty good.
Yeah, that's what, I mean, you were close.
Right.
That's why I'm asking if there was disappointment that you didn't just quite get over that threshold.
Yeah, no, I was happy with what I got.
Yeah.
It put me in good position, and yeah.
Are you at all concerned about carrying that momentum into a runoff? Because a runoff is a totally different animal than the primary.
It is a totally different animal. It's going to boil down to, is he able to motivate his supporters, or am I able to motivate my supporters? And so it's a different type of campaign, and it's, sure, it's nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking. I always run scared. I'm running like I'm behind, and we'll just see how it turns out.
Indulge me for a second here, because
Okay.
you brought up something when we were talking before this interview where you said at the time when you were there in the 80s, it was conservative Democrats and more liberal Democrats. Are you seeing some of the same things with the Republican Party now, where you're seeing more moderate Republicans and more conservative Republicans?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. When I ran the first time, it was Democrats, but in order to get elected in Texas, you ran as a Democrat. You know, I was an anomaly. And like I said, there were 16 Republicans in the House. I ran as a Republican. Well, it would have been much easier to get elected as a Democrat. So because it was all Democrats, you had all varieties. You had liberals, you had conservatives. So you had to just sort of figure out where this particular Democrat was on the spectrum. Like Governor Perry, he was a Democrat state representative with me at that time. What it's changed now is I see the Democrat Party as much more homogenous. I mean, it's progressive, and they're very similar. On the flip side, it's easier in most parts of the state to get elected as a Republican. So therefore, we have a lot of people just file to run as Republican because they want to get elected, but their ideology can be from very liberal to very conservative. So it's still odd to me to see a campaign sign that says conservative Republican. To me, Republican should mean conservative, but now they all differentiate. I mean, my opponent doesn't even say Republican. He just says conservative. So the landscape has pretty much flipped when it comes to Democrats and Republicans.
Is there any concern that what could happen to Republicans could happen, is what happened to Democrats in the 80s?
Yeah, it's going to continue evolving. You know, I don't really know. Part of what's going on this year is part of the growing pains, I think, because we do have sort of an intra-party fight. And we've got the leadership from President Trump on down on the more conservative side trying to help conservative challengers to the more liberal incumbents. And I think 10 have already lost, and there's another 10, I believe. It's a really interesting time in Texas to see what happens on these runoffs. I mean, they're down to hand-to-hand combat. They're very, very hard fought.
Yeah. Thank you for indulging me on my political science question there. Final question for you. There's somebody out there that's watching this interview. They haven't made up their mind who they're going to vote for yet. How do you convince them to vote for Alan Schoolcraft?
If they haven't been paying attention to the dozens and dozens of mail pieces coming through from both sides, and I tell them, look, if at this point you're still not sure who to believe, you know, who's the liberal, who's the conservative, then just back up for a minute and look and see who is supporting who. I'm supported by President Trump, Senator Cruz, Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Attorney General Paxton, Ag Commissioner Sid Miller, even Matt Rinaldi, chairman of the state Republican Party. They're all supporting me, so there must be some significant reasons for that.
That's all the questions I have. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think we've covered it. That's fine.
Yeah, I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thank
all right.
you. Thank
Enjoyed
you.
it, Steve.
Yeah.